The night my mother-in-law told me to know my place or find the door, I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just looked at my husband across the dinner table and waited. He looked down at his plate. That was the moment I understood everything I needed to understand. My name is Iris, and I was 32 years old when I finally stopped being the woman who kept the peace. I had been married to my husband for 7 years. We had a 5-year-old daughter named Zoe, a house in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio, and what looked from the outside like a perfectly fine life. My husband worked in project management. I worked part-time as a graphic designer while managing most of the childcare and household. We had date nights occasionally. We argued occasionally. We were, by most measures, a normal couple. The problem was never my husband, exactly. The problem was what happened to him every time his family entered the room. His mother had a way of arriving that felt like a weather event. She didn't knock. She announced. She had opinions about my cooking, my cleaning, my parenting choices, my hair, the way I arranged the furniture in a house I paid half the mortgage on. She would deliver these opinions the way someone delivers mail. Routinely, without emotion, as if it were simply her job. My husband called it, just how she is. I called it something different, but I kept that to myself for years. His sister wasn't much better. She was 3 years younger than him, unmarried, and had appointed herself the family's unofficial historian of my failures. Every holiday, she found something. The turkey was dry one Thanksgiving. I had used paper plates at a casual 4th of July. Zoe's ballet recital outfit apparently didn't match well enough. Tiny things. But they added up the way tiny things do when they never stop. What kept me in place for so long was the belief that I could outlast it. That if I stayed calm enough, smiled enough, apologized enough, things would eventually normalize. That my husband would eventually see what was happening and step in. I kept waiting for that moment like someone waiting for a bus that was always 15 minutes away. 7 years is a long time to wait for a bus. The evening everything changed. Started as a birthday dinner. My mother-in-law was turning 65, which meant the entire extended family descended on my sister-in-law's house in Westerville. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends I barely recognized. I brought Zoe, a homemade layer cake I had spent the better part of Saturday making, and every intention of surviving the evening without incident. For the first 2 hours, I managed it. Then, my mother-in-law started talking about Zoe's school. Zoe had been struggling a little that semester. Not dramatically. Not in a way that worried her teachers. But she was having some social anxiety around group activities. We had spoken with her pediatrician, and together we had decided to try a small therapeutic playgroup on Saturday mornings rather than immediately jumping to formal evaluation. It was a thoughtful decision. It was our decision, as her parents. I don't know how my mother-in-law found out about the playgroup. She found out about everything eventually. She brought it up at the dinner table, in front of 17 people, with her fork still in her hand. I heard you're sending Zoe to some kind of therapy group. I felt the air shift. It's a developmental playgroup, I said carefully. Her doctor suggested it. For a 5-year-old. She said it the way you'd say for a 5-year-old if someone had just told you they'd enrolled their kindergartner in tax law. Early support makes a big difference, I said. We feel good about the decision. My sister-in-law made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. I mean, kids used to just play outside and figure it out. Now everything needs a specialist. There were nods around the table. More than I expected. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not anger yet. Just the old familiar tension. The kind I had learned to manage by counting silently to 5 and letting the moment pass. But then my mother-in-law said something that made 5 seconds impossible. I think it's the mother's anxiety rubbing off on her. Children absorb that. The table went quiet. I looked at my husband. He was reaching for his water glass. Excuse me, I said. I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm being honest. Zoe picks up on your energy. You're always worried. Always hovering. That little girl needs room to breathe. I'm following medical advice, I said, and my voice was steady, which surprised me. I would appreciate it if we didn't diagnose my parenting at a birthday dinner. There she goes, my sister-in-law said quietly, just loud enough. What does that mean? I asked. I looked directly at her. She shrugged with exaggerated innocence. You always take everything so personally. Something unlocked in me then. Not dramatically, not loudly. Just a door I had been leaning against for a very long time, and it swung open so quietly that nobody noticed at first. I take it personally because it is personal, I said. You're talking about my daughter and my parenting at your mother's birthday dinner in front of the whole family. That is, by definition, personal. My mother-in-law set down her fork. I think you owe this family an apology for your tone, she said. I looked around the table. Everyone was watching. Some with discomfort. Some with expectation, most of them waiting to see what I would do, the same way they had been waiting for 7 years, certain I would fold the way I always had. Then my husband spoke. He didn't say let's change the subject. He didn't say that's enough. He looked at me with a tightness in his jaw that I recognized as embarrassment. Embarrassment at me. And he said 4 words I will never forget. Just apologize, Iris, please. In 7 years, he had never taken a real side. He had always managed to stand in the exact center, calling it fairness, calling it keeping the peace, calling it maturity. But this was different. This was a direct request. Choose them. Right now. In front of everyone. I picked up my napkin from my lap. I set it on the table. I went to find Zoe in the playroom down the hall, helped her with her shoes, told her we were going home. My mother-in-law called after me. My sister-in-law said something to the table that made several people laugh. I didn't turn around. I drove home with Zoe asleep in her car seat. I didn't cry during the drive. I had cried enough over this family to fill something, and I was simply done filling it. That night, after I put Zoe to bed, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Not making plans yet. Just sitting with the truth of what had happened. And what had been happening, really, for 7 years. At some point around midnight, I opened my laptop. I want to tell you I had a plan ready. I didn't. What I had was a quiet, clear knowledge that something had to change, and that I was the only one who was going to change it. I had a degree in graphic design and 8 years of professional experience, including 3 years as a senior designer before Zoe was born. I had gone part-time when she arrived, which made sense at the time, and had slowly become the arrangement that everyone in the family took for granted, including my husband. I was available. I was flexible. I handled the school pickups and the pediatrician appointments, and the grocery runs and the birthday party logistics. And none of that had ever been acknowledged as labor because it didn't come with a paycheck. I spent that night researching. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a former colleague who had relocated to Portland 2 years earlier and had mentioned more than once that her firm was looking for senior designers. The second was to a family law attorney in Columbus, because I needed to understand what my options were before I made any decisions involving Zoe. Both conversations were more promising than I expected. By the end of that first week, I had a clearer picture. My colleague's firm had a remote-first position that was genuinely available. Full-time, senior level, real benefits. She wanted to set up a formal interview within the week. The attorney walked me through my rights regarding parental relocation within Ohio, custody documentation, and what a legal separation would look like financially. I didn't know yet what I was going to do, but I needed to know what I could do. The days that followed were, from the outside, completely ordinary. I took Zoe to school. I went to the grocery store. I made dinner. My husband came home, ate, asked how Zoe's day was, watched something on television, and went to bed. He never apologized for what he'd said at the dinner table. He sent me a text the next morning that said, "Can we talk tonight?" and then never brought it up. I stopped waiting for him to bring it up. The interview happened on a Thursday afternoon while Zoe was at school. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, my portfolio pulled up, and I was on the call for 90 minutes. They offered me the position 4 days later. Not a starter position. Not a favor. A real offer with a real salary, significantly more than I had earned part-time, and the option to work fully remote, which meant I did not have to move if I chose not to. That detail changed everything. I accepted the offer. I told no one. Over the following 2 weeks, I rebuilt the financial architecture of my life, quietly and carefully. I had my own bank account. I had kept one, always, on the advice of my own mother, who had learned that lesson the hard way. And I began routing my new direct deposit there. I spoke with the attorney again, and we drafted the initial paperwork for a legal separation. We did it correctly. We did it according to Ohio law. Every decision I made, I ran through one question first. What is best for Zoe? If the answer was clear, I moved forward. If I wasn't sure, I waited until I was. My husband noticed nothing. He was either very trusting or not paying close enough attention. Probably both. During those 2 weeks, my mother-in-law called twice. My sister-in-law sent a group text to the family thread about healing as a family that included a passive-aggressive reference to people who create unnecessary drama. My husband forwarded it to me without comment, and I think he genuinely thought that was communication. I stopped responding to most of it. Not out of anger. I had moved past anger somewhere around day 4. Just because I no longer had anything to say. People cannot rewrite your words when you do not give them words to rewrite. I had spent 7 years explaining myself, and it had accomplished nothing. Silence, it turned out, was a completely different kind of power. By the end of week 3, everything was in order. The job was real and starting in 10 days. The attorney had filed the initial separation documents. I had spoken honestly with my own parents, who were 2 hours away in Cincinnati, and who were prepared to help me with Zoe during any transition period. I had arranged for Zoe to continue her Saturday playgroup without interruption. I had thought through every logistics question I could identify and found an answer to each one. There was one thing left. I had to tell my husband. I had gone back and forth about how to do this. Part of me wanted to hand him a letter and not be in the room. Part of me knew that was unfair, that 7 years deserved more than a note on the counter. I chose the harder option. He came home on a Friday evening, and I had asked my parents to take Zoe for the night. The house was quiet. I had made dinner, not as a gesture of warmth exactly, but because I am the kind of person who makes dinner even during the hard conversations. We sat across from each other at the table, and I told him the truth. I told him I had accepted a full-time position. I told him I had spoken with an attorney. I told him I had filed for legal separation. I told him I loved him, but I could not continue building a life where I was expected to absorb disrespect indefinitely for the sake of family harmony, and where he could ask me to apologize in front of 17 people without it meaning anything. He was quiet for a long time. I didn't mean it like that, he said finally. I know, I said. That's the part that hurt the most. He asked if we could work on it. Whether there was a version of this where we went to therapy, where things changed, where the family dynamics shifted. And the honest answer was, I didn't know. I told him that. I said I wasn't certain this was over. I said I was certain that I was not going backward. That night he slept in the guest room. Not because I asked him to. Because I think, for the first time, he understood what I was actually saying. The days that followed were not clean or simple. A legal separation with a child is never simple, regardless of how cooperative both parties try to be. We hired a mediator. We worked through a parenting plan. I continued working my new job full-time from home. Zoe remained enrolled in her school, in her playgroup, in the Saturday activities she loved. I was determined that whatever disruption existed would exist between the adults, not in her daily life. My mother-in-law found out within the week. She called my husband, apparently multiple times. My sister-in-law sent me a text that said she was shocked and hurt. I saved that one because the audacity of it genuinely took my breath away for a moment. Then I set my phone down and went back to work. My husband's family had many opinions about my decision. They were consistent in one thing. None of their opinions included any acknowledgement that they had contributed to the situation. As far as they were concerned, this had happened to them. My mother-in-law eventually called me directly, about 3 weeks into the separation. I answered, which surprised her. She had clearly prepared a speech. She started delivering it, something about family, about commitment, about what I was doing to her son. I let her finish. Then I said very calmly, "Everything that happened at your birthday dinner is exactly why we are here." She started to argue. I said, "I hope you have a good evening," and I hung up. I did not feel powerful exactly. I felt tired and a little sad and entirely certain that I had done the right thing. Here is what I did not expect. My husband changed. Not overnight. Not in the dramatic movie way where the character has one big moment of revelation and becomes permanently different. It happened slowly, over about 4 months. He started going to therapy, which he had resisted for years. He started showing up to Zoe's playgroup sessions occasionally, sitting in the parent observation room, paying attention. He had conversations with his mother that he had never had before. I don't know exactly what was said, but I know they were not easy, and I know they happened, because things shifted. He apologized to me about 3 months into the separation. Not a reflexive apology, not a sorry you felt that way, but the real kind. He said he's had spent years prioritizing his family's comfort over my dignity, and he was ashamed of it. He said that what he asked me to do at that dinner table was wrong, and he had known it was wrong in the moment and done it anyway. And he couldn't explain that, except to say that he was a coward and he was sorry. That apology took me a long time to receive. Not because I didn't believe it. Because I had waited so long for something like it that I wasn't entirely sure what to do with it once it arrived. My mother-in-law apologized, too. About 5 months in. It was a different kind of apology. More defensive, more qualified, more "I'm sorry if you felt" rather than "I'm sorry for what I did." But she said the words. She came to our house, sat at the kitchen table, and looked at me directly and said she had not treated me fairly. Coming from her, that was significant. I acknowledged it. I didn't thank her for it, but I acknowledged it. My sister-in-law has never apologized. I've made my peace with that. Zoe is doing beautifully. Her social anxiety has improved considerably since starting the playgroup, something her therapist noted at her 6-month check-in, something I mentioned to no one in particular and since simply filed away as evidence that trusting a doctor over a dinner table opinion was the right call. My husband and I are not back together, not fully. We are in something that doesn't have a clean label. Co-parents who are also slowly, carefully, rebuilding a friendship, exploring whether there is something left that is worth rebuilding into something more. Some weeks that feels possible. Some weeks it doesn't. I've stopped needing to know which one is true before I'm ready to know. What I do know is this. I have a career that pays me well and challenges me genuinely. I have a daughter who is healthy and happy and goes to sleep every night feeling secure. I have a relationship with my own parents that I had let wither during those years of managing everyone else's comfort, and I've tended to it until it bloomed again. I have a version of my life that I built deliberately with clear eyes, while everyone around me thought I was just being difficult. Someone told me recently, a friend who'd watched the whole thing unfold from a careful distance, that she didn't know how I stayed so calm through all of it. How I made the plans and executed them and sat across from my husband on that Friday night and said the thing that needed to be said without falling apart. I told her the truth. I did fall apart. Just not where anyone could see it. And falling apart and continuing forward are not mutually exclusive. You can do both at the same time. The night my mother-in-law told me to know my place, she thought she was reminding me of my limitations. She was, without realizing it, showing me exactly how much space I had outgrown. And walking out of that dinner, not with anger, not with a speech, just with my daughter's coat over my arm and my keys in my hand, was the quietest and most important thing I have ever done. I don't need anyone's permission to take up space in my own life. It just took me 7 years and 1 dinner table to finally believe that.